If you go back not too many years, we were probably 18 to 24 months behind where Samsung was at. Mm-hmm. And now we're at a point where we are leading the industry in terms of NAND development, in terms of layer count, energy efficiency, just the scale of what we're doing.
Good morning and welcome back to another episode of Making It Happen by Sims. In today's episode, we're bringing you something a little bit different to our usual. Joining us with Andrew Mierau, the Senior Product Marketing Manager from Micron Technology. Andrew kindly joins us from the States today. So we're actually going to have a discussion around a product release that's coming up in the enterprise market for Micron, specifically SSD. But firstly, Andrew, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you. Thanks for joining us. It's I imagine it's early morning where you are compared to where we are. So it's we're deep into the afternoon here. So we normally do our podcast in the morning, but we'll crack on with a coffee. So it's great to have you join us. And before we get into what is an exciting new SSD launch that's going to be hitting the enterprise and data center market in the coming months, it'd just be good to give a bit of an introduction to our audience and to yourself and about your experience and with Micron and what's happened in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. And then thanks again for having me on. We love the partnership that we have with Sims. And so, pleasure being here. So I've been at Micron for about 10 years now. I'm in charge of our enterprise storage in the commercial channel. Before that at Micron, I headed up our competitive intelligence, which is an interesting role to have. It's trying to understand what our competitors are doing, how they compare, to our products, and not only talk to our partners and customers about that, but feed that back internally to our engineering groups and things like that. And but prior to that, I was in a more of a hardcore engineering role for the previous 15 years in a completely different industry. But one of the things that I did do is that I spent the last few years before joining Micron, I was the enterprise storage editor at Tom's Hardware as kind of a side gig before side gigs were really really more of a thing. And so, but that was a really interesting and a lot of fun working on that. And I think it prepared me for being a Micron, because it wasn't just understanding what our competitors' products were doing, but how they marketed their products, how they sold them, how they talked to the press. It was a real fun thing to do and helped me get where I'm at Micron. So.
Oh, great. Yeah. So obviously it's interesting about Tom's Hardware element of your career. So obviously you're accustomed to being an editor and telling stories, and that crossover kind of helps when it comes into marketing, having come from engineering, right? So how have you found that crossover from engineering to marketing and combining the two, really?
Well, it's one of the things that I guess it just came natural to me. And so I didn't really think anything of it until I applied at Micron and started realizing, wow, there's not really a lot of people that make that jump in that way. Now, it was interesting when I was at Tom's, because I had an engineering degree, engineering background. But when you looked at all the other websites, the Anon-Text of the world, SSD Review, all of these, PC Perspective, there were doctors, there were insurance salesmen. One of my good friends that now he's at Phison right now. He was a former Navy nuclear submariner. So it was all walks of life, but not a lot of people with an engineering background. And so, being able to do that, honestly, I'd spent 15 years as a design engineer, and Micron spent about 2 seconds asking me about that. They wanted to know about Tom's Hardware. So, So to anybody out there, if you ever want to switch careers, starting it as a hobby and getting comfortable doing that it's worked out well for me.
Great. That's great advice. And so that's really interesting to hear. So let's get into it. And, big times for Micron. So I think it's fair to say exciting big times, and the portfolio is just ever growing, especially on the enterprise SSD side of things, from QLC to NVMe drives, whether it's high performance, mainstream or high capacity. It seems like that Micron out there are really doing the most when it comes to innovation at the moment. And obviously you've got a background in looking at competition, but how does it feel you're stacking up at the moment against competition with this innovation?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things of having the competitive background that I do is people tend to listen because I spent a lot of times when I first started at Micron saying how we weren't competitive. You know,
Mm,
our portfolio wasn't the best. We had some good SATA products, but for the most part, we were late to NVMe to put it nicely, and it took us a bit to get around on it. And so, when I go and talk to our partners and our customers now, and I say, look, we really do have a world-class portfolio. Do we hit every single, product segment? No, we don't have SAS. There are things like dual port and some of the other things that we're not hitting right now. But we're at, we probably have 80 to 90% of the market completely covered. And back 7, 8 years ago when it was, when the portfolio was what it was, we go, hey, look, we've got to pick the right customers. We have to find the right opportunities to where our products fit the use case, right?
mm.
Where today it's go into any opportunity against anybody else. We're not, you know, Samsung had been the gold standard for enterprise SSDs and consumer SSDs as well for a long, long time,
Yeah,
and they were difficult to compete against. We go up against Samsung every single day now, and we win absolutely more than our fair share.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
I feel like, to your point, our portfolio is the best that we have ever had it, but also probably one of the best, if not the best, portfolio in our industry as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And obviously, I mentioned before as we got started on the call, I've been at Sims for 4 years, and just seeing that growth within the portfolio. Obviously, you put it on a chart, and it matches every use case that you can pretty much say now right now, especially in the enterprise and DC market. So that's really really cool. And so let's talk the 9550, which is obviously
Yeah,
your background today and an upcoming product. So a
yeah.
lot of people will be accustomed with the 9500. So an NVMe SSD like this that is, the speeds are going to be at a new level for DC. Just how different is this to the 9500, and what's so special about it? It's going to make it the fastest in the market.
Yeah, so the 9550, so our previous one was the 9400. I know we kind of jump around on naming
Yeah. So
conventions.
yeah.
No, that's that's our fault in marketing for jumping around. But it could not be any more different than two SSDs could be between the 9400 and the 9550. So a couple of the key highlights here is one is it's an internally developed product from the ground up. So our previous 9000 series devices, they were partner products, even though they used Micron NAND, and we did a lot of the firmware and things like that. It was always a third party controller,
Mm-hmm.
which has its benefits, but it has a lot of drawbacks. The benefits are, you're buying from another company. It's a product that's done. You don't have the development time and the resources, but you're very limited in what you can do, right? Because their decisions have been made at a design level that are, for an ASIC. Once it's created, there's not a lot of things you can do to change it without a lot of heavy lifting. So with
Yeah.
the 9550, it is our first internally designed PCIe Gen 5 ASIC. So it's our first high performance ASIC.
Mm.
Um, so that's one of the big pieces of it. And so obviously because of that, we have full control over the firmware. We've leveraged a lot of what we have learned on our 7000, our mainstream series over the last couple of generations, been able to apply it to that. And so that's one of the big pieces. So the ASIC is kind of the brains of the operation. And then
Mm-hmm.
the other side is the NAND. And so um, we've really pushed on accelerating our NAND development and going from really being, if you go back not too many years, we were probably 18 to 24 months behind where Samsung was at.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're at a point where we are leading the industry in terms of NAND development, in terms of layer count, um, energy efficiency, um, you know, uh, just the scale of what we're doing, and to again, some of our competitors were now 18 months to 2 years ahead of where they're at,
Yeah.
and so we're shipping our eighth generation NAND 232 layer. On our client side, we started shipping ninth generation,
Mm-hmm.
which is 276 layer. You know, we're going up against competitors that are 128 layer. And
Yeah.
so that's a big part of it, is that if you can jump ahead in some of these technology areas, like, we're a semiconductor company, obviously, and
Yeah.
so being able to produce innovative next generation semiconductor products is kind of our heart and soul. And
Yeah.
so we weren't necessarily doing that 7 years ago, but we made a concerted effort to say, look, this is what we're good at, this is what we know, this is what we have to excel in, because at the end of the day we're still Micron,
Mm.
you know and Micron is not Samsung. Everybody knows who Samsung is, right? Everybody has a TV, a washer and dryer, a cell phone. Like,
Yeah.
we could not pour enough money into marketing to get to the brand recognition that Samsung's at. So if you can't have that, what do you do? Well, you have to be innovative, and you have to put out a superior product. If you want to go, like I said, go into any opportunity and say, we're fine going right up against Samsung.
Yeah. Yeah. Got you. And in terms of form factors, obviously, let's touch on those. And
Yeah.
I think a lot more of the EDSFF form factors are being used right now. And I don't know what that looks like outside of the channel. I know that it's still very much a U.2 or U.3
Yeah.
situation. They are notoriously a bit later to adopt this, especially compared to hyperscalers. But are you starting to see that utilization of those form factors, the
Yes.
E1S and E3S, a lot more now? And are they how long do you think it will be until we start seeing that change? Obviously, and you're not producing U.3 anymore, I believe, is it?
Right. So just a point of clarification. So
Mm,
U.2 and U.3 were a weird one.
mm,
U.3 was just to enable these hybrid backplanes, where the backplane, depending on how you wired in the signal, could do PCIe, SATA, or SAS. Our U.3 products were always backwards compatible with U.2.
yeah.
But when you move to Gen 5 signaling is not supported in a U.3. So that's why if you saw anybody like Micron with U.3 with Gen 4, and you go, well, why did they move back to U.2? It's not really moving back, because the you know the use case is identical. It's just that you can't do that with Gen 5. So
Yeah.
that's the first fight.
Yeah.
Second thing is you're dead on with U.2. The channel loves it. It is 90+% of what we ship, even when compared to M.2 and like you said, the EDSFF form factors that are coming out. It's mostly U.2. But here's the thing, and here's the big key takeaway for everyone, is that, you may think, okay, the channel generally tends to, be laggards, and they lean in really slowly onto some of these new technologies. But here's the thing, U.2 will not be supported for Gen 6. Gen 6 signaling does not work with U.2. So when we hit Gen 6, you have to be on one of the EDSFF form factors. So E1.S, E3.S, and the numerous variants that are within that. So, as channel customers and end customers, you've got to transition. You go, well, that's a long ways away. I mean, how long did it take us to get to Gen 5? And the answer
Mm,
is, it took a long time to get to Gen 5. Gen 4 had been around, and Gen 3 was around even longer. Gen 3 was around for darn near a decade, right? But if you saw at Flash Memory Summit, Micron, we were already showing off a PCIe Gen 6 SSD. You look at the standards groups and how they're adopting it. Gen 6 is going to be here in the next couple of years,
yeah.
not 5 to 10. It's going to be 2 to 3. And so what we're seeing is the big movement will be to E3.S. E3.S is just darn near the exact same size as U.2.
Yeah.
Um, just very minor changes in that. And so at 10 feet away, you might not be able to tell, other than the fact the connector looks significantly different.
Yeah.
We are already seeing large opportunities in the channel that 6 months ago even would have been U.2 all day, every day, that are now coming back to us and saying, we're worried about the longevity of U.2, and for anybody out there, next couple of years, U.2 is still going to be perfectly fine. But
Yeah.
if you're looking beyond that 2 year horizon, now's the time to really start putting that effort into looking at E3 as a standard and as a platform, and as what the server motherboard manufacturers are where they're at in their development as well.
Yeah, and I think what you said there is quite interesting. It's just the pace of which technology is moving at the moment. Obviously, there was much more of a lag between Gen 3 and Gen 4, and obviously into Gen 5. And Gen 6, like you said, is going to be here before you know it. And the
Yeah.
way these form factors move and how fast a lot that people are a lot quicker to adopt them. But that must be
Yeah.
one of the key takeaways from the business in the last 4 or 5 years, that the R&D and the pace that Micron have to keep to be a step ahead. That's the biggest change in the business right now.
It is, and I would say up until about 6 to 9 months ago, it was accelerated, and we had to make, like I said, a concerted effort. Start, at a CEO level, right?
Yeah.
This wasn't a ground up. It was definitely a tops down of we have to do that. But honestly, what's changed in the last 6 to 9 months has been AI,
Yeah.
and AI. You know, when you look at moving to Gen 5, there are a lot of customers out there that will probably never see the benefit of Gen 5 and for a storage medium, right? If you're a small medium sized business, right, and you're running databases, doing some basic cloud stuff, you may not even see Gen 5. You'd be network limited. You all sorts of other bottlenecks in the system. But AI, there's two things that, or technically there's three things that AI loves: compute cores, right? GPU cores. They love GPUs, but and everybody that's in our industry, they know NVIDIA, they listen to NVIDIA, they're the gold standard for AI, right?
Mm.
But memory and storage is right there with it. And we've done a lot of tests where we've shown AI systems where the performance difference of just upgrading the GPU from an A100 to an H100, and you see, some significant improvements. But then you move from a Gen 4 to a Gen 5 SSD, and you see more improvements, not necessarily on a percentage, but on a cycle time.
Mm.
And so AI is not only pushing the speed, they're also pushing capacities, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was, less than a year ago, a 30 terabyte SSD was big,
Mm.
right? They were big, they were expensive. There wasn't, the sort of traction that we see today. And now people doing AI, they're like, yeah, 30 terabytes was last year. We need 60, we need 120. It's,
Yeah. Yeah.
throw as much as you can at it. And so AI, I think, has really, put the pedal to the floor in terms
Mm.
of development. And to your point, look, if you're not riding that wave, and if you're not innovating in that area, AI will leave you behind, because it is about being the biggest and the fastest. And if
Mm.
you're one step behind, it's not like you get 20% of the market, you get 0% of the market.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Very
And
difficult.
no, fully understand. And I think in terms of just more around that innovation and this product in general, and just the R&D process and who you collaborate with. Obviously, you're collaborating with the likes of the tier one OEMs on this product and how you bring it to market. Are you doing the same with NVIDIA, and not strictly on this
Absolutely.
product, but how does that work with the collaboration? Has it always been that way with Micron?
So I would say, couple ways to answer this. So, since I joined Micron, like I said, I've been here almost 10 years now.
Mm.
I feel like we've always been more of a partner in terms of the ecosystem, because at the end of the day, when you're not a Samsung, or if you go back a few years, if you weren't Intel, right, you needed to make sure you played well with others, because you couldn't go around dictating what you thought needed to be done. You had to be, a part of that. And so I feel like we've done a good job historically.
Mm.
But with NVIDIA is an interesting one, because they all of a sudden turned from a desktop GPU company to one of the most valuable companies in the entire world,
Yeah.
seemingly overnight. And in the grand scale, it was basically overnight. It was over a couple of years, right? And so we've worked with them for a while, but over really the last year or two, we've become, we have engineering to engineering relationships. We actually have a workload team that's now based in Colorado, where I'm out of. They do a ton of work on benchmarking our products, early on. But they've spent a ton of time one of the graph neural networking benchmarks that NVIDIA runs is BAM, Big Accelerator Memory.
Yeah.
We've worked really closely with them. We have a bunch of data on the 9550 that we've released, and it shows that even against other Gen 5 competition, we're kind of wiping the floor with them in a lot of ways, not only in performance, but also things like power efficiency. And it's because of that relationship that we have with them. And kind of one of the anecdotal things from our engineering teams that, you go back a couple of years and we were asking of NVIDIA, right?
Yeah.
Please help us with this. We want to be involved with this, to the point where we're at now, where we're sending them back mountains of data saying, this is how your products perform. This is how your benchmarks perform. And if you make these changes, we think that we can get, a better overall result, a better ecosystem. So that's a big change over the last couple of years, that we've turned from, more of, just being a part of it to being a real partner with NVIDIA. And look, like I said, if you want to succeed in AI in 2024, 2025 and beyond, you have to have that relationship. It's more, you can't just say, I put out a product, it's fast. And we'll see that from our competitors. They'll put out a product and they go, it's amazing in AI. Well, how is it amazing? Well, it does 14 gigabytes per second. Okay. But where's the dotted line from that performance to AI performance? And we're
Yeah.
able to show that with our AI benchmarks, with our partnerships, not only with NVIDIA, but with our integrators, our channel
Mm.
integrators. You
Yeah.
cannot do one of the big things we always talk about is you can't do AI alone. Maybe if you're NVIDIA, NVIDIA can probably do it on their own, right? But if you're not that, you have to have a memory and storage partner. You have to have your GPU partner. You have to have your software partner. You have to have an integrator or somebody that you can call in the middle of the night saying, our system's down. What is the service that you're going to provide to give us uptime, right?
Yeah.
So you got to play well with others is the big message.
Yeah, got you, got you. So that's really, really cool, and that's a really good drill down. So I just want to move on to a bit of market stuff in just a second. But
Yeah.
in terms of the 9550, when will this be available to the market?
Probably next month.
Next month, yeah.
So we're gonna make it as for everybody that wants an enterprise storage SSD and they're stocking.
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
we'll have that. But no, yeah, next month, and obviously we'll be ramping up throughout January and February as well. So we're kind of in that stage right now where we're working on getting samples out to some of our lead partners, get qualifications done. Outside of necessarily my business, we're definitely sampled all the major OEMs, hyperscalers, things like that. We've had nothing but positive feedback, and the way we look at it, if you can pass a qual from a hyperscaler,
Mm.
the Metas and the AWSs of the world, you're gonna pass everything else, because they are rigorous, to say the least, in terms of how hard they hit these products, and the sort of stress that they put on them to make sure that they can run in that sort of environment. And so if you pass that, you're pretty good. You're pretty
Yeah.
well off.
No, that's awesome. Great. And I just wanted to touch a little bit on market with you, and specifically around demand. So I think it's fair to say for us, it might be different where you are. It probably is, but demand has been probably not as strong as what we'd like. But obviously, we've seen a rising market, and it continues on the enterprise SSD, and it probably will do into the coming years. But how does demand look stateside on the enterprise SSD and DRAM, if you mind?
Yeah. So there, I have to choose my words very carefully here, right? And I would say demand right now it's softened from where it was in the April, May, June timeframe. It's certainly softer than it was then. Um, but historically, it is still on the stronger side. When we compare our September, October, November to last year,
Hmm.
we're the market is way better off than it was then. Kind of depends on who you are, though. That
Yeah.
November last year was the historic low in terms of pricing for enterprise SSDs. It's one of those things is that if your storage and memory company is making a lot of money, that typically means prices are higher and there's constraint in the market. If the Samsung and Microns of the world are losing $1 billion in a quarter, it means you're getting product at a very, very low cost. We're kind of in that intermediary. We probably, like I said, this time last year we were at historic lows. May, June timeframe, we got back up to probably higher than the highs that we were expecting, and now we're coming back, and I think we're kind of more at an equilibrium. Pricing, I believe, is pretty much leveled off. You may see some spots of minor, low single digit changes, but we're seeing in a lot of ways a lot of the bigger opportunities, there's deals to be made out there. And so, like I said, I don't think we're not at the highs of the highs. We're not at the lows of the lows. We're kind of in the middle, and we need to, we're going to see what happens really at the beginning of the year. This time for us is usually, a little slower. In the U.S., once we hit Thanksgiving, between Thanksgiving and and the Christmas and the holiday season, a little slower for us. So we'll see where it comes back out in January to see where the market's at. But like I said, we're not at a point where we can't find deals. There are deals out there. There are opportunities out there, not just from Micron all the way down, but it's competitive, right? It's competitive. You got to be there with product. You got to be there with price. You got to be there with marketing and support and sales. It's not to the point where you can just walk in and say, here's a product at this price. Do you want it or not? Because there's 10 other people in line that are willing and waiting to buy it. We're not at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great. No, well, I appreciate you for giving us that update in the market, and obviously for drilling down into 9550 with us, obviously, and we're looking forward to bringing this to the market with you guys next month, which will be December, and I think this podcast will probably come out around then as well. So expect to see samples and that going out in December. And I thank you for joining us today, Andrew, and it's been a pleasure meeting you. And I hope you have a very good end to the year.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Definitely appreciate being here. Appreciate your partnership. And it was great meeting you. And have me on anytime. We can talk about whatever you want. You want to talk about cars or TV? Whatever you want. We don't always have to talk about SSD.
Yeah, we'll see where we can branch out. We talk about some funky things in here, but you know what? The next Micron product will be out before you know it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Cheers, Andrew. Bye bye.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.